October 1976. Graceland's jungle room had been transformed into a recording studio, but the man sitting at the piano bore little resemblance to the king of rock and roll the world once knew. Elvis Presley, bloated and broken at 41, stared at sheet music through prescription-fogged eyes. His marriage to Priscilla had been over for 4 years, but the wound remained as fresh as the day she walked out. When he began to sing Hurt, everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something beyond music. They were hearing a man's soul disintegrate in real time, creating what would become his most devastating farewell to the only woman he ever truly loved. The Graceland that hosted the recording session in October 1976 was a monument to excess and despair. Elvis had turned his beloved home into a pharmaceutical fortress, surrounded by enablers and yes-men who fed his addictions rather than confront the obvious truth. The king was dying before their eyes. A man who once commanded stages with magnetic sexuality and raw power now struggled to climb the stairs to his bedroom without assistance. But it was the emotional destruction that truly devastated those who had known Elvis in his prime. 4 years after his divorce from Priscilla was finalized, he remained utterly obsessed with her. Her photographs still adorned his nightstand. Her favorite flowers still filled the vases throughout Graceland, and her memory haunted every corner of the mansion they had once shared as husband and wife, father and mother, partners in what should have been a fairy tale life. The decision to record at home wasn't just about convenience, it was about necessity. Elvis could barely function in public anymore, his weight fluctuating wildly due to the cocktail of prescription drugs he consumed daily. The powerful stimulants that helped him perform were balanced by equally powerful sedatives that helped him sleep, creating a chemical prison that trapped the most naturally gifted entertainer of his generation. When producer Felton Jarvis suggested recording Hurt, a song written by Trent Reznor and originally recorded by 9 Inch Nails, Elvis initially resisted. The song was dark, introspective, and brutally honest about self-destruction and regret. But as Jarvis played the original version, something in Elvis's damaged psyche connected with the raw pain in the lyrics. This wasn't just a song, it was his autobiography set to music. The irony wasn't lost on those present that Elvis, who had built his career on bringing joy and excitement to millions, was now drawn to a song about causing hurt to those you love most. As he sat at the piano that October evening, his bloated fingers finding the keys with muscle memory alone, everyone in the room sensed they were about to witness something unprecedented. The king was about to bare his soul in a way he never had before, using someone else's words to confess his own sins and failures. The first time Elvis sang through Hurt that night, his voice cracked with emotion and physical strain. But there was something else there too, raw honesty that had been missing from his recordings for years. This wasn't the polished, commercial Elvis that Colonel Parker demanded. This was a man confronting his own mortality and the wreckage of his personal life, using music as his confessional and the recording studio as his church. As the recording session progressed into the early hours of October 29, 1976, Elvis's condition became increasingly apparent to everyone in the room. Between takes, he would disappear into the bathroom, returning with the glassy-eyed stare that had become his trademark in recent years. The prescription bottles that filled his pockets rattled like maracas with every movement, a pharmaceutical percussion section accompanying his descent into addiction. But it was during the recording of Hurt that the true extent of Elvis's self-destruction became undeniable. As he sang about causing pain to those he loved, tears began streaming down his bloated face. This wasn't just interpretation, this was confession. Every word felt like he was speaking directly to Priscilla, admitting to the hurt he had caused through his addictions, his affairs, his inability to be the husband she deserved. The musicians and engineers watched in stunned silence as Elvis poured 2 decades of regret into a 3.5-minute song. His voice, though damaged by years of abuse, still carried the emotional power that had made him legendary. But now, instead of celebrating love and life, he was mourning their loss. The studio became a temple of grief, with Elvis as both priest and sacrifice. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and assistant, later said that watching Elvis' record Hurt was like watching a man write his own eulogy. The king kept starting and stopping, overcome by emotion, struggling to get through certain lines without breaking down completely. When he reached the parts about remembering everything and everyone going away in the end, his voice became merely a whisper, as if he was afraid speaking the words too loudly would make them more true. Priscilla haunted every note of the recording. Though she wasn't mentioned by name, her presence filled the studio like a ghost. Elvis had hurt her through his drug abuse, his paranoia, his inability to prioritize their marriage over his career and addictions. He had pushed away the one person who truly understood him, who had loved him not as Elvis Presley the superstar, but as the vulnerable, scared young man she had met in Germany all those years ago. The recording session stretched on for hours, with Elvis obsessively perfecting every nuance of pain in his voice. He wasn't just making an album, he was creating a document of his destruction, a musical suicide note that would outlive him and serve as a warning about the price of fame, addiction, and the inability to hold on to love when you have it. By the time the session ended, everyone in the room knew they had participated in something historic and heartbreaking. When Hurt was completed, RCA executives were deeply conflicted about releasing it. The song was too dark, too personal, too honest for the Elvis brand they had spent decades cultivating. But Elvis insisted it be included on his next album, and eventually his wishes prevailed. What they didn't anticipate was how the song would affect those who heard it, particularly one person whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's. Priscilla heard Hurt for the first time while driving in her car in Los Angeles. She had to pull over, overwhelmed by the raw emotion in Elvis's voice and the obvious desperation behind every word. For the first time since their divorce, she truly understood the depth of his pain and self-destruction. The song was his way of apologizing for everything: the drugs, the distance, the way his addictions had slowly poisoned their marriage until there was nothing left but hurt. But the most devastating performances of Hurt came during Elvis's live concerts in 1977, his final year. By then, his physical deterioration was impossible to hide. He would take the stage overweight, sweating profusely, struggling to remember lyrics to songs he had performed thousands of times. But when he sang Hurt, something transcendent happened. The broken man became an artist again, channeling his pain into something beautiful and terrible that audiences were stunned into silence during these performances. They had come to see the king, but instead they witnessed a man publicly confronting his own mortality and failures. Elvis would often stop mid-song, overcome with emotion, his eyes searching the crowd as if looking for Priscilla's face among the thousands of strangers. The song became his nightly confession, his public acknowledgement of everything he had lost and destroyed. Concert. Reviewers struggled to describe what they witnessed during these performances. Many wrote about the uncomfortable intimacy of watching such a private moment of pain displayed on a public stage. Elvis wasn't entertaining anymore. He was bleeding in public, using his platform to cry out to the woman he had lost and could never get back. The most heartbreaking aspect was how the audience responded. Instead of the usual screams and excitement, there was often profound silence followed by sympathetic applause. They recognized they were witnessing something beyond entertainment. They were seeing a human being stripped of all pretense, standing naked in his pain before the world. It was Elvis at his most vulnerable and, paradoxically, his most powerful. Those closest to Elvis during this period said that Hurt became his obsession. He would listen to his own recording repeatedly in his bedroom at Graceland, sometimes playing it on loop for hours. It became his meditation on loss, his daily reminder of everything he had given up for fame, pills, and the artificial world he had constructed around himself. In the months following the recording of Hurt, Elvis's decline accelerated dramatically. Those around him watched helplessly, as the song seemed to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. He was indeed hurting everyone he touched, pushing away the few people who still genuinely cared about him, retreating deeper into the pharmaceutical cocoon that was slowly killing him. But Hurt also became his way of reaching across the void to Priscilla. Though they rarely spoke directly, she later revealed that the song affected her profoundly. She began to understand that behind all the chaos, the drug abuse, and the destructive behavior was a man drowning in his own success, unable to find his way back to the simple love they had shared in Germany so many years before. The song took on prophetic qualities as 1977 progressed. Elvis's performances became increasingly erratic, his physical condition more alarming. But Hurt remained consistent, raw, honest, and devastatingly emotional every time he performed it. It was as if the song had become his anchor to authenticity in a world that had become completely artificial. August 16, 1977. When Elvis was found dead in his bathroom at Graceland, Hurt suddenly transformed from a confession into a eulogy. The song that had documented his self-destruction became the soundtrack to his funeral, a final statement about a man who had everything the world could offer, but couldn't hold on to the one thing that mattered most: love. Priscilla attended his funeral, and those present said that when someone mentioned Hurt during the service, she broke down completely. The song had been his final love letter to her, his way of saying goodbye while acknowledging all the pain he had caused. It was his admission that he had hurt the person he loved most in the world, and that the guilt and regret had ultimately killed him. Years later, Priscilla would say that Hurt was the most honest Elvis had ever been about their relationship and his own failures. It wasn't romantic or pretty, it was brutal and real, like love often is when it's filtered through loss and regret. The song became his gravestone inscription, a final statement that even the king of rock and roll was just a man who had made terrible choices and lived with unbearable consequences. Legacy of Hurt extends far beyond Elvis's personal story. It became a template for how art can transform pain into something meaningful, how confession can become creation. Elvis had spent most of his career entertaining others, but in Hurt, he finally revealed himself completely, creating something that would outlive him and serve as a reminder that fame and success mean nothing without love, health, and human connection. Hurt stands as Elvis's most honest artistic moment, a raw confession of love, loss, and self-destruction that transcended entertainment to become art. In facing his own mortality and failures, Elvis created something eternal, a reminder that even kings can fall, and that the greatest tragedy isn't death, but dying without the love that could have saved you. What songs have helped you process your deepest pain? Share this story and tell us how music has been your companion through life's hardest moments. Subscribe for more stories about the intersection of music and the human heart.